This is Ben Borg.
This is Katrina Borg.
This is Claire Green.
This is Maggie Morgan. And this is the More Than Macros podcast.
This episode of the More Than Macros podcast is brought to you by Married to My Macros, performance nutrition coaching. Married to My Macros is a personalized one-on-one nutrition coaching service providing the highest level of support to clients with the practical tools and accountability needed to improve health, physical performance, and body composition through diet. While this podcast will fuel your mind, let the team at Married to My Macros fuel your body.
So, welcome back to part 8 of Ben and Kat's IVF journey. Can you believe that?
I'm like almost one a month kind of then, hey? Just about. Except it's been like a 12-month process, so yeah. I'm like an elephant.
We're doing really well. So welcome back to More Than Macros podcast. Today we're going to be sitting down with Kat and hopefully for the last time before she gives birth to little baby Borg.
Hopefully.
Super excited. Kat is 2 weeks out from her due date. So that in a very like weightlifting competition way.
Yeah.
And as you can probably tell, I'm super excited for her and Ben. We're going to sit down and talk to her a little bit about what the experience has been like for her these past few weeks since we sat down with her last. There's been lots of changes, probably physically as well as, just with the environment in Melbourne right now. So we're going to go through all of that. And then the next time we sit down with you, you'll have a little screaming baby with you.
Hopefully. Hopefully that's not in like 4 weeks' time.
I think Ben is going to join us too in a little bit. So we'll be able to get some insight from him as to what his experience has been and how he's feeling about the upcoming weeks. So do you want to take us through, I guess, since we last sat down? I think you're at 31 weeks at that point. Some of the main maybe physical changes that you've been experiencing, any appetite changes, anything like that. That might be applicable to anyone else listening who's pregnant or might be pregnant soon.
Yeah, interesting. I would say like from 31 weeks to 38 weeks has maybe been the most interesting shift, I guess. And like maybe not one that I was expecting, because I certainly remember it. I was talking to another girlfriend who's pregnant right now, and she's about 25 weeks, and she was saying how she was reading that the baby will like double in size over the next month. And I thought, like I remember distinctly between about like 28 and 33 weeks, just like exponentially blowing up size-wise, which I already felt huge at 28. So that was like, I started panicking because I'm like, oh my gosh, if I do this again before term, I'm going to be a house. I haven't. That was definitely my biggest period of growth, was like 28 to 31, maybe 33, something like that. But I would say a lot has changed. And I guess I got to 33 weeks and I was like, almost in tears. I was like, I can't do another 7 weeks of this. I'm in so much pain. I'm so uncomfortable. I started having reflux for the first time in my pregnancy, which I had been fortunate enough to avoid. Lots of women will start getting reflux in the first trimester and it can come and go, or it can carry the whole way through. And I've not had even, my first trimester was like more like a refluxy throwing up, but it wasn't. I'd never had reflux, and I was like, what is this? Like there's actually just a ball of acid sitting there. It was terrible, and it gave me so much empathy for so many of my clients, because I didn't realize it was that bad, and I didn't realize like I couldn't sleep because I had to be sitting like at a 90-degree angle, and so that was. Then I started panicking that I wasn't going to sleep anymore for the next 7 weeks. And luckily, I don't know if I should say this, but like I've had like 3 or 4 days of reflux total.
So that's not that bad in the larger picture, I guess.
It's just that those days were so awful. And so I certainly feel for people who experience that throughout the end of their third trimester, or even throughout their pregnancy. Definitely once you get to the third trimester, I do think even if you've experienced it throughout, it's quite different, because the mechanism of action in the first trimester is that your relaxin hormone increases, and that causes kind of the gastroesophageal sphincter to open up a little bit more, and so you can get that kind of backflow. In the third trimester, you also get a spike in your relaxin as your body gets ready to deliver. But in addition to that, you've also got this like massive baby sitting there pushing up on all of those organs. And so you've got not just like the chemical changes, but the really significant physical changes as well. Obviously, if you're carrying multiples, even more so. So it's, yeah, pretty profound, but luckily I only had a couple days of that. And I think for me, like listening to a lot of girlfriends who have kind of recently gone through the third trimester, you know, they've started experiencing a little bit of pelvic girdle pain, or, you know, just that discomfort with being so big. And so everyone that I run into, like all the healthcare professionals and people out on the street, like I've, you know, twice in the last 2 months, but they're just like, oh, are you just feeling like, get this baby out of me? But I feel like, quite honestly, I've had so much pain with my pelvic girdle throughout my pregnancy that at this point it kind of feels normal and it's not getting worse. And so it's not a huge change for me. Whereas I think once a lot of people hit this point in their pregnancy and they're starting to experience that for maybe the first time, that's a massive shift. And it's so demoralizing and so awful when you like can't get off the couch or can't get out of bed. And so for me, it's kind of, it just hasn't been as big of a change as I was expecting. 33 weeks was awful. I specifically remember my energy tanking, the reflux was happening, I wasn't sleeping, and I just was like, oh my God, I can't do this for another 7 weeks. And then it was like turned around completely. And I would almost say at like 38 weeks now, aside from the fact that like, yes, I'm really big and like our garden is a mess and I really want to clean it up and I can't do that. I kind of feel better than I have for most of the pregnancy, to be honest. So again, like how much of that is just because I experienced a lot of crap really early on, I don't know. But the sleep is definitely like an hour and a half, 2 hours at a time is probably the most I'm getting. But now Ben's not sleeping, so we've transferred that. And that is like, because particularly in your third trimester, but it can definitely happen earlier, like 90% of pregnant women start snoring. And for like a multitude of reasons, right? So you've got like, for myself, I have really bad pregnancy congestion. And so you've got all this swelling in your nose and your airways. You've got that baby sitting up higher. There's very few positions you can sleep in. But like, I maintain that like, I don't snore very much in normal life, and I'm a very cute snorer. And this is unbelievable. I know he messaged you about this the other week. He was like, this wounded hog next to me.
Well, he was messaging me. It was like 3 a.m. Australia time, and I was like, what are you doing up? And what are you doing working at this hour? And he was like, I can't sleep, like cat's snoring really loud. And he wanted to take a video, but he knew how mad you'd get, so he didn't.
Well, because like initially I didn't believe him, and I was like, no, I'm just doing heavy breathing. I'm just doing, because I thought it was just like my congestion. Mm-hmm. But now it's like I can't, there's no position that I can put my neck in where I don't do it. And so I'm like snorting awake. So last night was probably like one of the worst nights. I snorted myself awake, and it was like an animal dying. It was so loud, and I wake myself up. I'm like, oh my God. It was like and I look over, and Ben's just like playing on his phone, doesn't even react to it. So I'm like, oh, so obviously that's not the first time I've done that, like tonight.
Oh dear, that's funny.
So it's like, I think, yeah, so he got up at like 2 last night, was up for a bit, and then I wake up if he's not in bed. So anyways, it's just like we're definitely settling into this like being awake in the middle of the night pattern.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, right now, so if anyone listening doesn't really know where Ben and Kat are right now in Melbourne, they are back in lockdown. And I think, as much as there's probably, or I know that there are a lot of unfortunate things that come along with that, probably not, having the obligation to be social in any way, shape, or form is almost like a blessing in disguise for you guys right now.
I keep saying to everyone, if there was ever a time you wanted to be locked down, it's when you're like 37, 38 weeks pregnant, because like I'm not sleeping, my partner's not sleeping, and it just allows us to kind of have this little bubble. And in that sense, I'm not thankful we're in lockdown, but it's like, you know what? This is the best time to do it if we have to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So.
But how is that affecting, everything coming up, like the actual birth itself and your appointments and everything like that at this time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a different story altogether. And we'll get Ben in here. And anyone who's ever listened to Ben on a podcast before knows how he can get a bit ranty. I'm convinced he'll write a book about this. It's been not phenomenal. And so certainly I think by talking about it today, I guess my intention is maybe just to let other expecting moms know that, there's lots of people that understand what you're going through, and you kind of just have to find ways to navigate around it and make it the best experience possible for you, because if you focus on the negatives, it can really steal all the joy from this time, I think. So, I mean, my antenatal care has been pretty minimal my entire pregnancy. And, part of that is we opted to go with the public system because I feel quite comfortable and confident within it. I have a good background in nursing, and to an extent, labor and delivery, I have a bit of experience. So I was feeling good with that. But because I'm also kind of a normal medical case, it means that we've had very little contact with the healthcare system up to this point. Now, interestingly, we were supposed to do this podcast last week, and I kind of knew this would happen somehow. But I'd gone in for a midwife appointment later in the week, and had mentioned to the midwife the exact same things I've been mentioning my entire pregnancy. But within the public system here, you see a different midwife every time. And this midwife was a little bit concerned because I was complaining about heart palpitations, which I said were my most annoying symptom. I've had them throughout, and they're not necessarily getting worse. But it's kind of like, and my rate and rhythm, if I check my pulse, is regular, fast, but like pregnancy normal sort of thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not throwing off PVCs or other like ectopic or abnormal beats that just aren't perfusing and you're not picking up on a pulse reading, which I know and I understand. So I complained about that, and that I was having all this flushing, which is another kind of like third trimester symptom where it can almost feel like you're not getting blood draining from your upper body. And so it stays up there and you get like the red ears and everything like that. So I was kind of complaining about that, just it being the most annoying thing. And she's like, oh, we should probably check this out and make sure that like, just because you haven't labored before, that everything's good and you're going to be fine through labor. And I was so offended. In my head, I was like, don't you know what kind of athlete I am? And just like really had to kind of take it back and be like, Katrina, like so much changes in your cardiovascular system during pregnancy, so much changes with your blood flow. Like it's not unreasonable for them to want to like cross their T's and dot their I's on this. So they're like, okay, well, you're going to need to go to your GP, and then you're going to need to go get a Holter monitor. But before you see your GP, you're going to have to see the OBGYN. So it just ended up going from like no appointments to like 6 just to like get this checked off. And then I also mentioned like baby was having a quiet day that day and just wasn't moving around as much, but she's still moving around. And again, this has been her normal throughout my pregnancy. It's been very typical that she's kind of maybe had a bit of a slower day, and then the next day I've been really tired, and then the day after that I wake up and I'm like visibly bigger, like she does a huge grow. And anyways, they got quite concerned about that because they're like, well, you're technically like your early term now, and so if she's starting to slow down, it's probably better to get her out than to leave her in, so we're going to send you for fetal monitoring. And it's like literally as we're talking about this, she's like squirming in my belly. I was like, she's super active right now, like this is just her, this is just what she does. they're like, no, we're gonna send you for monitoring anyway. So poor Ben is like not allowed to come to these appointments, right? So he's sitting downstairs in the car, and I had to phone him, and I'm like, oh, I have to go to fetal monitoring. He's waiting to go to the gym. I was like, it'll probably just take 40 minutes or something like that. So we go in, baby's perfect. They're like, oh, she's a model baby. Like, she needs to have a chat with all the other babies in here about what they're doing and blah, 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 blah. So then I go see the OBGYN the next day. And the OBGYN is like, well, because you've had fetal monitoring, we should send you for an ultrasound because you haven't had one since you're 20 weeks. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like I have clients to see.
I have things to do, people.
Yeah, and then again, and it's like, so Ben is now like, oh, they seem really concerned about this and is starting to get worked up. I was like, they're not concerned. I was like, they're being proactive. Like, they're just making sure that they've kind of, like I said, done all their checklist things. They know everything's good. It's no one's really like worked up. But because he doesn't get to be there, he can't really get that vibe. I've been trying to phone him from the appointments and like FaceTime him or have him on speaker, whatever they'll let me do, which is kind of hit and miss. Anyway, so we go for the ultrasound. Ultrasound's perfect. Everything's great. The guy's like, okay, stop worrying. I'm like, I'm not worried.
You guys are, or would be.
Yeah.
Too.
So anyways, it's been a busy week, and I just thought it was funny that I'm like, guys, I'm like almost 38 weeks pregnant. We've completely ignored me the entire pregnancy. These are not new symptoms. These are not new complaints. And now it's like, oh my gosh, I'm like, we're talking about getting baby out. I'm like, no, baby's fine. And I got a paper to like. So yeah, it's been interesting. And I think, again, for me and my comfort level, it's been annoying but okay. But I really feel for the fathers out there and the women out there who maybe aren't as comfortable or don't feel as informed about not necessarily what's going on, but how medicine works and like policy and procedure and things like that, right? So I think that that's kind of the big thing right now. And, you know, all of our friends that we have that are going through pregnancy and delivery, sorry, I'm fighting a sneeze, at the moment is like, they just don't have a touch point for what's going on. They don't know what to expect. And so there's a ton of anxiety. I think the biggest thing that came up in Melbourne recently was they, in a press conference, stated that they changed the rules for expecting parents. And what they were going to allow was the one support person, so your partner, if that's your partner, to be there for the entire duration of labor and delivery. But after the child was born, that person had to leave within 2 hours. And so that was a huge drama. And I, like, for Ben, he was just like, let them try and kick me out, right? I had one big night of like spaz over it. And then I was like, you know what, we'll just see how it goes when we get in there, because I just can't see a midwife kicking a dad out after 2 hours. Like I can't see it. And anyways, the government's kind of reneged on that. And we have some friends who've subsequently given birth and fathers haven't been kicked out afterwards. Basically now what they're saying is, if you're in there for labor and delivery and you stay, you can stay as long as you want. But the second that you leave, then you're done for the day.
Right.
So my mom's like, oh, well, Ben's going to need to eat. I'm like, Ben will suck it up. Like, we will bring food with us and he will eat that.
Yeah. Speaking of food, how has your appetite been in the past few weeks? Has it changed at all?
Appetite better. I know that was something that we talked about a lot in the last one. It's definitely improved. Or I've just learned to manage it a bit better is probably more what it comes down to. Splitting my meals up earlier in the day, prioritizing my protein and my veggies, things like that. But I also think I've kind of, like I said, that period between 28 and 31 to 33 weeks was when I did my most significant growing. And since then, I've gotten a little bit bigger, but not much. And so I think I've kind of adapted to my size and where she's sitting relative to my organs. So it's kind of like anything. When you increase someone's intake, say, initially they have a really hard time adjusting to that, and you acclimate and move forward. And I think it's kind of similar to that. Like, I've acclimated in terms of like where she's sitting and how things feel, and I'm now able to eat a bit more, which is definitely good, because I think when you're getting to that point where you're not getting good quality sleep, you're not resting, maybe you're more anxious, particularly in the context of COVID. We're kind of hitting all of those cortisol points that are so detrimental for us. And being able to eat somewhat regularly is probably the best thing you can do for yourself in those instances, because you certainly can't do anything about the sleep.
Yeah. Or COVID. Kind of
yeah. You just you can only control what you can control. And I know that for other clients, they haven't reported the same thing. Like, they've struggled right up until the end. For me, it's been a lot easier. And I think I've just been quite proactive about it as well.
Good.
So.
Good. And 2 weeks, how are you feeling about like actually going to the hospital? Do you have how is that situation looking for you? Is it how you expected to feel at this point?
Well, I've got some things done in the last week or two that I really needed to check off my list. And so now I'm like, okay, whatever happens, we can deal with it. And I think I'm feeling pretty good. I would say I tend to get a little bit of anxiety around 9 p.m. at night, when I'm really tired and I'm really ready to go to bed and I just want to go read my book, and I never know, am I going to get a really terrible night's sleep, or am I going to get a somewhat okay night's sleep? And so it's at that point at 9 o'clock where I'm just oh my God, I hope I don't go into labor tonight, because I really want to get some rest, because I really want to go into labor rested. And which I find interesting, that that's the only kind of point that it, concerns me. And I think it's kind of this idea of almost a nesting type response, where you want everything to be perfect and everything to be ready before the baby comes, right? I want to be perfectly rested. I want to have as much food prep done as possible. I want my house to be clean. I want all the bags to be packed. And I think it's important to realize that, yes, once the baby comes, your life is going to change forever, but the world does not stop. Right? So if your house didn't get cleaned, or for me, the car, I really want to wash the car. If the car doesn't get washed, it's not I can't ever wash it again. Right? If I don't get the best night's sleep going into labor, it's well, that sucks, but probably your attitude going into it, and having that attitude of, okay, this is what I'm working with, I'm just going to deal with it, as opposed to, I wasn't well rested enough, I didn't have this, and this wasn't perfect, and I've only got one support person because of COVID. You can really set yourself up to have a much more negative experience than you need to. So yeah, I think it's important to kind of recognize that not everything is going to be perfect and perfectly ready, and that's okay. You're going to find a way to deal with it on the other side.
Yeah, and you'll have fun.
Right. Yeah. It's it's not that I'm never going to be able to vacuum my house again.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a little bit more difficult child, but probably not too much more difficult than it would be right now.
I was going to say, probably way less difficult with a child than it is with our dog at present. So.
Right.
All right, Ben is here. I don't know, are we ever? Are you ready for a rant?
It's been a while.
No, just you in general. We were just talking about kind of
Pressure's on.
Heading into the hospital and potentially that kind of coming up at any time, and how are we feeling about that? And I was saying that my one anxiety point is kind of 9 p.m. Perfect, blows my cover here. No, at 9 at night, if I'm really tired and I'm just oh, I just hope I don't go into labor tonight, because I really need a good sleep before this happens.
Well, seeing as it's been 2 months since either of us had a good sleep, I doubt that there's one on the cards in the next 3 weeks.
We have covered that as well, so we don't need any impersonations.
Okay. Are you asking me a question? You asked me how.
Oh, how are you feeling about it? Yeah.
I'm excited. I guess, for me, I kind of in this place where, you know, when you have all the theoretical knowledge, you know, when you're learning to drive and it's like, you've read the book and you kind of like had a few lessons and people are telling you about their like experience with driving, but you don't actually learn or really know what they're talking about, or you can't relate until you're actually in the driver's seat. I think that's kind of the trepidation that I kind of feel like at the moment. Is I feel like I'm as prepared as I probably can be, but I also feel like that is still not a level of preparedness that we're used to. And I guess that given kind of everything in our life is relatively built around structure and routine and foresight and preparation, it's kind of, I'm actually looking forward to having something that's completely the opposite. Until I met Kat, I basically lived my life winging it, and it got me like this far. So it's kind of nice that it's going to be like my time to get back to that comfort zone.
Let me remind you, Ben, that when you moved to Canada and he left his like 9-to-5 finance job and was working MTM from home, and we varied our training schedule around my nursing, that he had an absolute conniption and broke down because he couldn't handle training at different times of the day.
You need some structure and repetition.
So as much as this is a lovely idea, stay tuned.
Well, I think it's going to be a couples therapy session, but if I had to argue that one of us was more able to adjust on the fly to changing circumstances, I would argue that would be my role in this relationship. I'm excited. I think more than anything, I'm like super excited. Obviously, like I'm super nervous, and there's obviously, you know, it's been a long process to get to this point, and so I think there's a lot of like, maybe I'll kind of calm down once kind of holding baby a little bit, and then the other part of me is like, I'm probably never going to be calm as far as like having a daughter goes for the rest of my life anyway. So I think there is a little bit of that, like just wanting to get through the labor and the delivery and actually be holding baby, because it's been like this, like hurry up, cook faster, like seeing her kick and stuff, and I'm really looking forward to like that actual, I guess, like what do you say, bringing baby earthside, right?
Yeah, like getting to be a little bit hands-on. I think you've talked throughout the entire process about how it's tough to be on the bench and be just the support person.
I imagine the delivery room is even more so. You're not even on the bench now, you're like sitting in the bleachers.
Oh, see, I disagree. I think the complete opposite. But I think the support person is so key in there. But yeah, I think that for someone who is so hands-on and likes to be so involved, I think that, you know, it's tough when it's like, oh, no, she's kicking, feel here. It's like, oh, she's not kicking anymore. You know, like, it's
really... cool. Like, she's big to the point now where it's like, even if you don't feel it, you can see it. Like, you can see, like, Kat was reading her book the other day and all of a sudden just dropped her book and there's just, like, this, like, butt, like coming, like, it's incredible. So, it's actually...
She got that squat booty.
I just had friends of ours, well, we've had a few friends in the last like 2 or 3 weeks have their first, and you see the pictures with the actual, and it's like, now it's like, how does that fit? Like, I can't actually conceptualize how she's sitting, like how she actually fits in the space. So
there's some space, like
yeah, I think more than anything, I'm just like, I'm super excited. You know me, like I get FOMO at the best of times. So to see like friends popping all over the place, it's just kind of like, all right, come on, like our turn, like let's do it. But she'll come when she's ready. And I think for us, or for you, the last thing was getting your master's assignment done. And now that that's been done, it's kind of like, cool, well, whatever happens from this point is all good. I've actually just booked this in a online seminar to give on like, I think the 8th. So
yeah, I saw that. I was like, oh, perfect.
But I did preface it with a warning that, hey, we might have to reschedule that one. But yeah, I think it's yeah, I'm kind of just like hanging out now, just waiting. I'm super excited, and yeah, I think that's probably the only way you can really describe it. And I probably a lot of that, like I've said, kind of all the way through, is that ignorance of like what's to come for the most part. But I think, you know, obviously, like if you're listening to this podcast, like it's no stranger the journey that we've been on, and I guess this is kind of like the milestone, right? Like this is kind of what it's all been about. And as much as it feels like the end of one chapter, it very much is like the start of something new. And I can't wait, man. Like I think for me, like I've never had any doubt that I would be a father. Probably
until about a year ago.
yeah, until the first time, probably a year ago. But I think for me, it's always been like one of those things where I was like, yeah, like not even in my like realm of possibility where I thought that like I wouldn't be a dad.
Ben told me
quite sure like what that would look like
on our first date that if I wasn't willing to have kids, it was a no-go.
A deal breaker.
Yeah.
So I think that and I've always wanted to be a young dad too. I think kind of having my parents be like quite a bit older and having quite older siblings. So 16 years between me and Georgie, my older sister, and 14 between me and Laura. So I think for me, I always wanted to be quite fit, active, healthy, like still decently young when my kids were teenagers, and try to be as hands-on and as involved as possible. So for when I was a teenager, my parents were both in their 50s. So it's kind of like a different dynamic that I've always thought like, I always thought 30, I always thought like that would be the milestone. We've done pretty well, I think, 31. So as long as she's not too late. Yeah, as long as she's not 2 weeks late, I'll be 31. So yeah, man, I'm pumped. I can't wait. I'm fucking super excited. Like, yeah, just for all of it. Like, yeah, I'm pumped. I'm super pumped.
So clearly he's not the one that has to push out a watermelon.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the thing too. It's like easy for me to sit here and be like, let's do this, like super excited. And Kat's probably like, you know that feeling you get before a workout when you I just don't want to
this one makes me sick to my
stomach. You have to get it done. I guess that's kind of the thing. But yeah, I mean, for us as well, it's kind of the first baby in the family for a long time too. So I think that there's a lot of like general excitement around us, a lot of buzz and hype. Like I know my sisters and my mom and aunties and cousins, and a lot of the most recent babies in our family have all been boys. So it's also the first girl that we've had in a long time too. So I think that, you know, particularly like Louisa and Auntie Helen are pretty excited for that. So
we're doing the best to like shake up everyone's COVID experience as much as possible.
Yeah. And I think speaking of COVID, I think especially mum is like handling the second lockdown much better from like a mental health perspective and a physical health perspective, because there is this like
look forward to.
Yeah, something to look forward to. And I think for her, like she wanted to make sure she was sort of self-isolating within 4 weeks of birth date anyway, so that no matter what was going on, like she wouldn't be a contagion or anything like that. But she could physically be present.
Yeah.
So that if anything, the lockdown for her has kind of made it easier, because there's nothing going on really socially that she's like not able to attend and like miss and that kind of stuff. So I think that it hasn't been the best, obviously, going back into lockdown, but it also hasn't equally been the worst possible timing ever.
That's what we were just talking about. Probably not the worst time to not have any social obligations if you're barely getting any sleep each night, right?
On like the selfish level for us, it's great.
To a degree. Like I think there's, you know, like we would have loved to have had like a baby shower and kind of be able to share like that experience and that kind of excitement more with the family as a whole, rather than a lot of like individual conversations. I think would have been nice. And hopefully like things settle down by Christmas and we are able to gather, because I think that would be a really big one. And not even from a family perspective, but like I said, you know, we just had 4 people in our pretty decently close circle all just have their first. So I think that, you know, with everyone to be able to organize like a Christmas party where it's like BYO baby, I think to not be able to do that would be really like a shame, especially that first year. And starting to get some of those photos of like, you know, here's you guys all as babies and you know, you've been childhood friends since like, I think like that's kind of the trepidation I have with the COVID stuff. I don't want my baby to get COVID, and obviously I don't want to get it either. But from like a lockdown perspective, yeah.
But I think, you know, it's kind of...
we want Auntie Mags to come and visit, you know, over the borders.
I mean, we spoke a little bit earlier about kind of shaping your own experience, like whether or not you're pregnant and whatever's going on, and how you can kind of allow COVID to steamroll, you know, and have all of these negative effects on you, or you can try and, like, it's okay to, and I think this is very general, it's okay to be upset and have those moments of frustration and anger, and it's not fair. But if we live in those moments, that's where it becomes problematic. So I certainly had one night where I was angry, we'll just say, very angry about the situation.
One night.
Well, no, there was
one thing she's anxious about.
One bad night. But I think it's important to try not to live in that, and to try and pull out those positives, right? And I know when we were speaking about the first round of COVID, it was, okay, this opportunity for all of us to slow down and evaluate what's important in our life, and not be on the go, and not be scheduled to the hilt every single day. Right. And for us during this round 2 experience, it's been, okay, like having the time to be a little bit quieter, and just turn inwards a little bit right at the end of the pregnancy, which is actually, you know, quite a gift. So it's kind of finding those positives and choosing to focus your energy on those, because focusing on the negative, no matter what your situation, is never really going to be all that helpful. I was reading an article the other day about premature births and COVID, and how they've just, like, the numbers have absolutely tanked worldwide. And this is kind of in the context of really premature, like that 28 to 31 week baby, and how they've just, the numbers have bottomed out, and in some places they're down 90%, and doctors can't figure out why. But it certainly raises some questions about the coincidence between having to slow down, and having to be at home and a little bit less, you know, active in a lot of senses, in countries where there's good support systems. It's been different in countries where there's maybe not, and how those rates of premature delivery have bottomed out. And so, you know, I think that for years and years to come, there's going to be a lot of really interesting questions and lessons to come out of this for us, right? So just trying to capitalize on the good stuff where we can find it, which is not always super easy.
Yeah.
Sorry. I've taken Ben's real exciting rant and just
ran all over it. Yeah. I think for the most part, like I want to believe that, like, regardless of kind of like all the external stuff going on, that as people, like as individuals, like we do tend to lean towards the more optimistic side, and trying to see you know, the opportunities rather than the challenges all the time. And so I think that regardless, I think that would have kind of been our mindset of what was going on. But yeah, like you said, it certainly has made that element easier of not needing to feel like you have all these other obligations external to kind of what's going on in the immediate. And it's kind of been nice as well. Obviously, you know, moved into the new house, we've had plenty of time to like set things up without being like we got to do this and we just got to do this to get it done. So it's given us a bit of time to actually like sort through some things and you know, play around with. I think Kat's gone through like 3 different carpets for the baby's room, like none of which she likes. We had time for a really good friend of ours to commission a piece to do as like the main feature of the nursery. So like little bits and pieces like that, it's actually been really cool. But at the same time, it's also like when there's nothing else going on, it's like every day is like only one day closer. Like, come on, like there's like nothing to distract you.
And
like,
also every day is like a lot of online
faster.
shopping.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, not to shop in store for baby stuff. That must be hard.
Yeah,
I think
I've done
set.
okay.
Yeah. She's managed, Mags.
It's like I try not to let Ben position himself at like the front desk, which looks out onto our entryway to the yard, because the mailman every day with the packages, he's just like,
Kat's on first name basis with like the Ozpost staff, because she's had to train them to like open the gate and drop packages rather than just like skip across and put your packages at the mail office. So like there was like a 1 week period where like Kat would hear her coming, just waddle up the driveway to like introduce herself. Like, so now now they just wave and they like drop the package at the door. Like, fantastic. Just go to well train. So,
practice for the baby.
is this the last catch up you guys are doing before?
Hopefully.
You don't want to go live on the drive on the way to the.
No, I do not. Yeah, I mean, look, we're hoping that this is the last one, but if baby Borg decides she'd like to be fashionably late, then there might.
Early.
Well, no, not early, but there might be one more in it, because I think that, again, for a lot of the women that go to that 41 and inching forward towards the 42-week mark, there's a lot of unique challenges and considerations there, and I'm happy to not necessarily experience that firsthand, but if we do, there might be a chat in it, so to be determined, I guess.
Have you got a Mags? If we were thinking about running a sweep. Maybe we should run a sweep with the podcast listeners. Like what day and how heavy. I reckon she's gonna come like the day after, but like 1 a.m. So like just missed her due date. That's my feeling.
I've been saying 39 plus 4 all along. So what's that? That's like August 10th.
Yeah, I reckon she'll be the 14th.
I feel like she'll be a week late just to mess with all of Kat's organization.
Thanks, Mags. Screw me up. Ben said yesterday, because I had just finished this huge project for my master's and submitted it, and so he's like, congratulations. He's like, so do you think you'll go into labor tonight?
She's on the couch and she's like, oh, I'm like, is this it? I'm like, imagine all this time you were saying, all I have to do is finish this master's piece, and literally like you submit it and it's like, baby.
Submit your guesses. And what about weight? What are you guys going for?
I mean, I think
based on the scans.
Oh yeah, I think we have like a cheeky little inside glimpse, but I think she'll hover right under the 8-pound mark. I think she'll be a good girl.
I reckon she'll be a little, unless she goes a week over, I reckon she'll be closer to 7.5 than 8. That's my inclination.
So we're both hoping for good things.
That's been out there for like 3 months though, that like 39 and 4, 39 and 4, 7.5, 39 and 4, 7.5, 39 and 4, 7.5. So we'll see what happens. But,
manifesting hard.
Yeah, I guess the next podcast will probably be like big bags, like under our eyes, like haven't slept in like 2 weeks, and then about halfway through a crying baby, like So, but yeah, I'm excited for that too. As strange as that sounds, like I can't wait. Oh, for anyone listening, if you're looking or if you're expecting and you haven't watched Babies on Netflix, if you don't get our newsletter, I would highly recommend watching that. I've like found that the most fascinating kind of documentary series, all about newborns and all about all the research and stuff that's going on for newborns. And the first episode talks about like the biology of the parents and the newborn baby post-birth. And so the big finding, like the big contention of this episode, like spoiler alert, is that they've always known that like the mothers produce oxytocin immediately. But what they found in the study is that the father also has the same capacity to produce the same amount of oxytocin, right? So that kind of like love drug, good for bonding. But what they found with the father is, although they have the same capacity, so biologically they're meant to be fathers, it's actually attributed to how like willing to be involved they are and how much they're willing to get their hands dirty. So it's actually like a super kind of like self-affirming, like it's up to you as a dad, like the more you're happy to like get into it and be a part of it, like chemically and like biologically, like things will occur to like encourage that even more.
So that was kind of like literally the more hands-on you're willing to be during like the labor and delivery and in that post-delivery phase, the more you produce, right? Like the more skin on skin the dad has during that phase. And so I think that was why, you know, it certainly didn't help that Ben watched that and then the government was like, oh, we're kicking dads out after 2 hours. He's like, I want my love drug.
That was ridiculous. I think that was always going to be pretty quick to
get shut down.
Which it has. Well, technically it has, I guess. It's still to the discretion of most hospitals, I think, right?
Yeah.
And once you leave, you become... Anyway, I guess that's probably a different podcast. But yeah, that was a moment where I was like... And I guess part of the kick that we've been on since being so pregnant and talking to, psychologists and psychiatrists and stuff that we've had on the podcast and fathers about getting into that whole, what it means to be a dad and the feelings of being on the sidelines and stuff like that. To be kind of going down that path where you're talking about how we feel like as a society, we're moving more towards making it easier for fathers to become a part. But then at the first hurdle for fathers to then be declared non-essential by state government in a entire pandemic, it's are you fucking kidding? I'm not a visitor. You talk about visiting us, I'm not a visitor, I'm the father. So there was a little bit of trepidation there, but it seems to have
we've both had
been
our evening of anger.
Yeah.
They've moved on.
So yeah.
Well, I can't wait to sit down with you guys. Hopefully in say 3 weeks or so, and episode 10, I think.
And not just still waiting.
Yeah, 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Regardless, I guess. I'm gonna
Yeah.
make it down fresh up.
One way or the other. All right, sounds good.
All right.
All right. Well, you guys hang in there for the next couple of weeks, and so excited for you guys. Hopefully, we'll be able to have visitors soon.
Yes. International ones too.
National ones. All right.
Thanks, Mags.
Yeah, thank you guys, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Beautiful.